A ship enters the Panama Canal from the Atlantic. By the time it reaches the Pacific, it is farther east than where it started. Then the ship does something even stranger. It climbs 85 feet above the sea. One country tried to cut through this jungle and failed. The builders who followed had to control a river, cut through a mountain, move an enormous amount of earth, and stop an enemy they could not see. This is how they did it. Panama is a narrow bridge of land between North and South America. The Atlantic lies on the Pacific side. The Pacific lies on the other. Before the canal, ships often had to travel around Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. That added thousands of miles and exposed them to rough, dangerous seas. The problem was not only about trade. In 1898, the American battleship USS Oregon was ordered from San Francisco waters near Florida. With no canal, it traveled more than 14,000 miles around South America. The journey took 66 days. That voyage showed how slowly the United States could move a warship between its two coasts. A shortcut across Panama could change shipping and military power. But the land between the oceans was covered by hills, rivers, jungle, and heavy rain. The distance was short. The ground was the trap. France came to Panama with a plan that had already worked once. Ferdinand de Lesseps had led the effort that built the Suez Canal in Egypt. Suez crossed mostly flat, dry land. Ships passed through a channel at sea level without being lifted over hills. Panama did not have enough available workers for a project this large. The French recruited thousands from the West Indies, especially Jamaica, while many engineers and officials came from Europe. De Lesseps believed a similar design could work in Panama. French digging began in 1881. A commission predicted that the canal might take about 8 years. It expected no problem at Culebra, where the route crossed the Continental Divide. But Panama was nothing like Egypt. Heavy rain flooded the excavations. The Chagres River could rise quickly. Workers cut into steep slopes only to watch wet earth slide back into the trench. Some machines were poorly suited to Panama's mud and rock. The project also suffered from weak organization and growing financial trouble. Every delay cost more money, and completed work could be buried by the next slide. The workers began getting sick. Yellow fever and malaria spread through the workforce. Many doctors still blamed poisonous air, bad smells, or disturbed soil. The role of mosquitoes was not yet widely accepted, so the insects spreading these diseases were not being controlled. The original French Canal Company collapsed in 1889. A second company continued limited work, but it could not complete the canal. The exact French-era death toll is unknown because the records are incomplete. The Panama Canal Authority uses an estimate. France left behind surveys, machinery, buildings, and a deep, unfinished cut through the earth, but it did not leave a canal. The French thought the mountain was their greatest enemy. It was not. Cuban doctor Carlos Finlay had argued that mosquitoes carried yellow fever. Later, experiments by the Walter Reed Commission confirmed the connection. When the United States took over the project, Dr. William Gorgas turned the discovery into a campaign. His crews screened windows and doors. They fumigated buildings. They emptied barrels and containers, drained standing water, cut back plants, and treated pools where mosquitoes could breed. The work was slow and easy to underestimate. It was also one of the most important parts of the entire canal. Yellow fever was brought under control in the canal zone by 1906. Malaria was harder. A different mosquito spread it. and it remained the greater killer during construction. Still, the employee malaria death rate fell sharply. The Panama Canal Authority reports a drop from 7.45 per thousand workers in 1906 to 0.30 per thousand in 1913. Doctors had not made Panama harmless, but they had finally made a long construction project possible. Before American workers could dig the canal, the political map of Panama changed. In 1903, Panama was still part of Colombia. The United States negotiated a canal treaty with Colombia, but Colombia's Senate rejected it. Panama already had an independence movement. The U.S. State Department says President Theodore Roosevelt sent warships to Panama City and Colón in support of it. Panama declared independence on November 3rd. The United States recognized the new country 3 days later. Then came an unusual negotiator. The man negotiating the next treaty for Panama was not Panamanian. Felipe Benoit Varilla was French and connected to the failed Canal Company. Panama's new government appointed him as its representative in Washington. On November 18th, Benoit Varilla and U.S. Secretary of State John Hay signed the treaty. The United States agreed to pay Panama $10 million, followed by yearly payments of $250,000. In return, it received control of Zone 10, miles wide. The treaty said this control would last in perpetuity, forever. It also gave the United States powers there, as if it were the sovereign. Panama's provisional government ratified the treaty. Many Panamanians later challenged its terms. America now had the authority to build, but the mountain was still waiting. The United States now controlled the canal zone, but its first years were slowed by disease, housing shortages, supply problems, and poor organization. Then Chief Engineer John Stevens saw the problem clearly. Digging the mountain was only half the job. Every load of dirt and rock also had to be carried away before the next load could move. Stevens rebuilt the railroad into the center of the operation. Steam shovels loaded dirt and broken rock into railroad cars. One famous Bucyrus shovel used on the project weighed about 95 tons. At the dumping area, a machine called the Lidgerwood unloader pulled a heavy plow through the open cars. It could empty a 20-car train in about 10 minutes. Project engineers estimated that 20 unloaders operated by 120 workers could perform the unloading work of 5,666 men using hand tools. The railroad tracks also had to move as the cut grew wider and deeper. A crane-like track shifter could lift and slide an entire section of track sideways. Fewer than 12 workers could move about 1 mile of track in a day. Project estimates said that moving the same track by hand could require at least 600 workers. It was one connected system: shovel, train, unloader, track shifter, repair shop, and schedule. More than 100 million cubic yards of material came out of the Culebra Cut alone. It helped build Gatun Dam, filled land near Balboa, and created a causeway stretching into the Pacific. At Culebra, even the lowest gap through the mountains originally stood more than 333 feet above sea level. To make room for the canal, crews had to cut deep into layers of rock and hard clay. Workers drilled holes, packed them with explosives, blasted the ground, and loaded the broken material onto trains. Then the mountain began undoing their work. On October 4th, 1907, a slide at Cucaracha moved into the cut after several days of heavy rain. For the next 10 days, it crept forward an average of 14 feet every 24 hours. But rain was not the whole story. Some of the worst slides happened during the dry season. The real problem was inside the mountain itself. As crews dug away the bottom of a slope, they removed some of its support. Weak rock pressed downward and sideways. In places, the bottom of the canal actually pushed upward. Tracks twisted. Steam shovels became trapped. Ground that looked finished had to be dug out again. One slide on the West Bank covered about 75 acres and added roughly 10 million cubic yards to the job. The Gold Hill slide added about 7 million more. In 1906, engineers estimated that the cut would require 53.8 million cubic yards of excavation. By 1913, the estimate had grown to about 100 million. The design had changed too, but the Panama Canal Authority identifies the slides as the main reason for the increase. In January 1913, another cucaracha slide pushed about 2 million cubic yards into the cut. There was no clear cure. The crews kept digging. Steam shovels number 222 and 230 finally met at the bottom on May 20th, 1913. On September 10th, the last rock from the dry excavation was lifted and carried away by the final dirt train. Even then, dredges continued digging underwater. The workers had cut through the mountain. Now the canal faced another problem. The middle of the route sat about 85 feet above the oceans. The builders dammed the Chagres River and created Gatun Lake. At the time, it was the world's largest human-made lake, while Gatun Dam was the largest earthen dam. The lake became a highway across the middle of Panama, but ships first had to climb up to it. Locks solved the problem. A lock is a giant chamber with a gate at each end. A ship enters, the gate closes behind it. Water flows into the chamber, and the rising water lifts the entire ship. When the water reaches the same height as the next chamber, the front gate opens. 3 lock steps at Gatun raise ships from the Atlantic side. Ships later descend through 1 step at Pedro Miguel and 2 more at Miraflores. That makes 6 lock steps during a complete crossing. The original chambers are 110 feet wide and 1,000 feet long. They were built in pairs, creating 2 lanes. Here is the clever part. No crane lifts the ship. The original locks need no pumps to raise it. Gravity moves water through hidden tunnels about 18 feet wide. Water enters each chamber through approximately 100 openings in the floor, lifting the ship more evenly and with less turbulence. Some lock gates stand more than 80 feet tall and weigh over 600 tons. Their lower sections are hollow and watertight, making the gates partly buoyant and easier to move. Small electric locomotives called mules travel beside the chambers. Their cables help keep ships centered and away from the lock walls. They do not pull ships across the entire canal. A complete passage through the original locks releases tens of millions of gallons of fresh water toward the ocean. Gravity can lift an enormous ship, but only when Panama's lakes contain enough rainwater. And behind every part of this system were tens of thousands of workers from around the world who built it and made it work. The Panama Canal Authority lists more than 56,000 people who worked on the American construction project over time. About 31,000 came from the West Indies, 11,873 from Europe, and 11,000 from the United States. Barbados was the largest source of recruited West Indian labor, with nearly 20,000 workers. By 1913, the locks were filling, the final excavation was nearly complete, and dredges were still clearing underwater slides. On January 7, 1914, a small crane boat named Alexandre Lavallee made the first complete working passage through the canal. The official opening came on August 15th. The steamship Ancon became the first vessel to make the official transit. There was no huge celebration. World War I had begun in Europe, pushing the canal opening out of the headlines. The American construction project removed about 239 million cubic yards of material, including the earlier French excavation. The total reached roughly 268 million cubic yards. The United States spent about $375 million on the project, including payments to Panama and the French company. The Panama Canal Authority reports that the final cost came in at about $23 million below the 1907 estimate. The canal was open, but the question of who controlled it was not settled. The final battle over the Panama Canal happened in Washington, not in the jungle. In 1903, Panama's provisional government appointed the French engineer Philippe Jean-Benoit Varia as its envoy to negotiate with the United States. He had not lived in Panama for 17 years. The treaty was signed on November 18, 1903, and formally ratified by Panama's provisional government on December 2nd. It gave the United States permanent rights over the canal zone. Over time, many Panamanians challenged the arrangement. In 1964, a dispute over flying the Panamanian flag in the canal zone led to riots and a temporary break in diplomatic relations. The crisis also concerned American officials. In 1975, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger warned President Gerald Ford, "If these negotiations fail, we will be beaten to death in every international forum, and there'll be all sorts of riots over Latin America." American negotiators changed their goal. Instead of permanent control over the canal zone, they focused on securing permanent American access to the canal. On September 7, 1977, President Jimmy Carter and Panama's leader, Omar Torrijos, signed two treaties. The Neutrality Treaty required the canal to remain open to ships of all nations. It also preserved the right of the United States to act if the canal's neutrality or operation were threatened. The second treaty ended the canal zone on October 1, 1979. The United States would operate the canal during a transition period, but Panama would receive full control on December 31, 1999. The treaties needed approval from 2/3 of the U.S. Senate. The Senate approved the Neutrality Treaty on March 16, 1978 by 68 votes to 32. It approved the Panama Canal Treaty on April 18th by the same margin. On the final vote, 52 Democrats and 16 Republicans voted yes. 22 Republicans and 10 Democrats voted no. Congress then passed implementation legislation, and President Carter signed it on September 27, 1979. The result was a negotiated exchange. Panama gained control of the canal, while the United States preserved permanent access and the right to defend its operation. Thanks for watching. I'm Andy with the History Portal. Subscribe, and I'll see you at the next chapter in history.